Okay, so some special pawn moves today. This should be a pretty quick presentation. So from the beginning, pawn promotion and then en passant. So pawn promotion, this is very, very quick and easy to understand. Simply put, when a pawn reaches the opposite side of the board, you can promote it to a more powerful piece. So you can choose between knight, bishop, rook or queen. Almost always it will become a queen because that's the most powerful piece. But you can occasionally have a situation where it actually needs to be a slightly weaker piece for whatever reason, but very rare. So whoever's to move in the diagram below will win the game. Let's assume it's a white move. White will play his pawn forward to a8, where it becomes a queen. Black, at that point, might as well promote his pawn to a1, where it too becomes a queen. But of course, it's white's turn, so he would capture the new black queen with his and be winning the game. Same applies in reverse. If black happens to move first, he pushes his pawn forward, gets the queen. White could push his pawn forward to get the queen, and then black would play queen takes a8. That's fine. It's easy to understand, but when it gets to the other side, you get a better piece. So you really want to try to stop the opponent getting a new queen. Okay, so the more tricky thing to understand, en passant, a pawn ambush. The en passant is something that many new chess players, and even some who have learned the rules and been playing for a while, don't know or don't understand. And its name literally comes from the French in passing. And it's an ambush that prevents the board from becoming too easily blocked. So it's a very dramatic example. Hard to think that you'd ever get a position that looks like that. But you can see, look, there's two long walls of pawns that have blocked each other in, and the game's just a dead draw. There's no way through. Now, even allowing for the fact that that's a pretty dramatic example, you can see why we need a way to stop the pawns getting blocked up like that. And that's what en passant does. It makes that kind of position rather difficult to reach. So it's an ambush. When a pawn moves forward 2 squares on its first move, an enemy pawn that it lands next to may, on the very next move only, capture that pawn in an ambush as though it had only moved 1 square. So let's see 2 examples. First of all, the black pawn goes from a7 to a5. Now white, on the very next move only, so immediately, can play his pawn to a6 as though the black pawn had only advanced 1 square, and then remove the black pawn from the board, so an ambush. Okay. What about if it's a white move? Well, if white moves his pawn from f2 to f4, black now has the choice to immediately play his pawn to f3 as though the white pawn had only advanced 1 square and take that white pawn off the board. So it's an ambush. However, the pawn being ambushed must have moved both squares. So if white moves his h3 pawn to h4, black cannot play an en passant of the h pawn. He can't move his to h3 and take the white pawn off. And that's because the white pawn only advanced 1 square, not 2. So I'm just going to reverse everything on this just to do that very quickly. So the black pawn from a7 goes to a5. It's moved 2 squares and landed next to a white pawn. White can play his pawn to a6 and remove the black pawn from a5 as an ambush. f2 to f4, it's moved 2 squares. The black pawn can therefore go straight away to f3 and take that white pawn off the board as an ambush. But h3 to h4 is not an en passant situation because the pawn has only moved 1 square. So here's the rule check. It must be done immediately, and the pawn being ambushed must have moved 2 squares. I would just say, when I say must be done immediately, I mean it must be done on the very next move. I don't mean to say you've got to do it within 2 seconds, but it must be done on the next move. An ambush doesn't really work if you leave it for 5 or 6 moves. If you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So it must be done straight away. The pawn being ambushed must have moved 2 squares. The other thing to say is this can only be done when it's a white pawn on the 5th rank or a black pawn on the 4th rank. And that's because it's the only place where a pawn moving 2 squares would land next to an enemy pawn. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense and you can now start to include en passant in some of your practice games, in some of your Pawn Wars games. Good luck.